The cafeteria went quiet in the wrong way. Tasha Freeman had learned to read silence like other people read faces. 8 years inside taught you that quiet didn't mean peace, it meant calculation. And right now, 300 women had stopped talking all at once, their eyes tracking Officer Catherine Reeves as she crossed the floor with a tray of medication cups. The new guard didn't notice. She never did. Tasha watched from her corner table as Reeves moved between the rows, her brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, her uniform still crisp despite the humidity that made everyone else's clothes stick to their skin. 6 weeks on the job. Still smiled at inmates like they were people. Still said please and thank you when she handed out pills. Still believed the rules on paper matched the rules that actually govern this place. Still alive but not for much longer. You see it too. The voice came from Tasha's left. Dominique Chin slid onto the bench across from her, moving with the deliberate slowness of someone who'd spent 15 years learning how to appear non-threatening. Santiago's crew. They'd been watching her for 3 days now. Tasha didn't respond. Didn't need to. Her eyes had already found them. 4 women scattered across the cafeteria, their positions too strategic to be coincidence. Rosa Santiago sat near the exit, her scarred hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't touched. Maria Vega stood by the serving line, her body angled to watch both Reeves and the guard station. 2 others Tasha didn't know by name flanked the blind spots where the cameras couldn't see. Classic setup. Prison arithmetic. Add up the angles, subtract the witnesses, multiply by opportunity. Word is Reeves testified against Santiago's brother, Dominique continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she worked here. Used to be a cop in the Bronx. Put him away for distribution. Santiago found out last week. Tasha's jaw tightened. That explained everything. In here, blood debts didn't expire. They compounded with interest. Officer Reeves finished her rounds and headed toward the guard station, oblivious to the mathematics of violence being calculated around her. She had that walk, confident but not arrogant, professional but not cold. The kind of walk that suggested she'd join corrections because she actually believed in rehabilitation, in second chances, in the possibility that broken people could be fixed. The kind of walk that made Tasha's chest hurt with something she'd thought she'd buried years ago. Not your problem, Dominique said, reading Tasha's face. You got 14 months left. Clean record. Model prisoner. You stick your neck out for a guard, you're throwing all that away. Tasha knew Dominique was right. She'd survived this long by following one simple rule: don't get involved. When Garcia got shanked in the shower, Tasha had been in the library. When the riot broke out in C Block, Tasha had locked herself in her cell. When they found Jenkins hanging in solitary suicide, the report said, though everyone knew better, Tasha had kept her mouth shut and her eyes down. Invisible. That's how you survived. That's how you made it home to the daughter waiting on the other side of these walls. But something about Officer Reeves made invisibility feel like cowardice. The cafeteria slowly returned to its normal volume. Conversations resuming, trays clattering, the ambient noise of 300 women pretending everything was normal. But Tasha could still feel it underneath, that current of intent. Santiago's crew wasn't rushing. They were patient. Professional. They'd wait for the right moment, the right shift, the right combination of variables. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But soon. Tasha stood, her tray still half full. Where you going? Dominique asked. Library. Library's closed for inventory. Then my cell. Dominique's eyes narrowed. Tasha. Don't. But Tasha was already walking away, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. She could warn Reeves directly, get labeled a snitch and end up in protective custody or worse. She could tell another guard, assuming any of them would listen to an inmate, assuming any of them cared enough to act. She could do nothing, let nature take its course, let the prison handle its own problems the way it always did. Or she could do something stupidly, recklessly noble that would destroy everything she'd built. The cell block was quiet during afternoon count. Tasha sat on her bunk, staring at the photograph taped to the wall above her. Her daughter Ayana at her high school graduation, cap and gown, smile wide enough to break hearts. 17 in the photo. 25 now. Waiting for her mother to come home, to be present for the life they'd planned together. 14 months. That's all Tasha had left. 14 months of keeping her head down, her record clean, her conscience silent. She pulled out the letter she'd received that morning, still folded in her pocket. Ayana's handwriting, always neat, always careful. Mom, I know you don't like talking about it, but I need to say this. Whatever you did to survive in there, whatever compromises you made, I understand. I don't judge you. I just need you to come home. That's all that matters. Stay safe. Stay invisible. I love you. Tasha read it 3 times, memorizing words she already knew by heart. Stay invisible. The smart play. The safe play. The only play that made sense. She folded the letter and tucked it back under her mattress, next to the other 47 letters she'd received over the years. Then she lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the concrete, trying not to think about Officer Catherine Reeves walking into an ambush she'd never see coming. The lights went out at 10 p.m., but Tasha didn't sleep. She listened to the sounds of the cell block settling, coughs and whispers, the distant clang of metal doors, the steady footsteps of guards making their rounds. Officer Reeves was on night shift. Tasha had checked the schedule posted in the common area. Reeves and Officer Martinez, covering 200 inmates between them, walking the long corridors where the cameras had blind spots and the emergency buttons were just far enough away to be useless. At 11:30, Tasha heard it, the distinctive scrape of a cell door opening when it shouldn't be. Then another. And another. Santiago's crew was moving. Tasha sat up, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear them in the corridor now, their footsteps carefully spaced, their movements coordinated. Professional. Practiced. They'd done this before. She thought about Ayana. About 14 months. About the life she'd promised herself she'd rebuild. Then she thought about Officer Reeves saying please when she handed out medication. About the way Reeves actually looked at inmates when they spoke, like their words mattered, like they were human beings worthy of basic dignity. About the fact that Reeves had no idea she was about to die. Tasha stood and moved to her cell door. The lock was supposed to be electronic, controlled from the guard station. But this was a prison built in the 70s, retrofitted with technology that barely worked, maintained by contractors who cut every possible corner. If you knew where to apply pressure, if you understood the mechanics, if you'd watched enough people exploit the same vulnerability. The lock clicked. Tasha eased her door open an inch, then 2, then wide enough to slip through. The corridor was dark except for the emergency lighting, casting everything in shades of red and shadow. She could see them now, 4 figures moving toward the guard station where Officer Reeves sat doing paperwork, headphones in, completely unaware. Santiago led the group, something metallic glinting in her hand. Not a knife, too bulky. Probably a lock in a sock or a battery wrapped in cloth. Something that would crack bone without leaving the kind of evidence that knives did. Tasha's hands were shaking. She'd been in exactly one fight in her entire life. The incident that got her sent here, the night she defended herself against her ex-boyfriend and accidentally pushed him down a flight of stairs. Manslaughter. 8 to 12 years. She wasn't a fighter. Wasn't a hero. Wasn't anything except a woman trying to survive. But Officer Reeves was about to die, and Tasha was the only person in the world who could stop it. She moved. Not toward the guard station, that would be suicide. Instead, she ran in the opposite direction, toward the fire alarm mounted on the wall near the showers. Her bare feet slapped against the concrete, the sound echoing through the corridor. Santiago's crew heard her. Turned. Tasha reached the alarm and pulled. The siren split the night like a scream. Lights flooded the corridor. Doors began unlocking automatically, the prison's emergency protocol, designed to prevent inmates from being trapped during a fire. Chaos erupted as women stumbled out of their cells, confused and disoriented. Officer Reeves ripped off her headphones and stood, her hand moving to her radio. Officer Martinez came running from C Block, his boots pounding against the floor. Santiago's crew scattered, disappearing into the sudden crowd of inmates, their weapons hidden, their faces carefully neutral. Tasha stood by the fire alarm, her hands still on the lever as guards poured into the corridor. She locked eyes with Officer Reeves across the chaos, saw the confusion there, the question, the beginning of understanding. Then Officer Martinez grabbed Tasha's arm, wrenching it behind her back. On the ground. Now. Tasha dropped to her knees, her face pressed against the cold concrete, her arms pulled behind her. She heard Reeves shouting something, saw boots surrounding her, felt the cold metal of handcuffs closing around her wrists. False alarm. Disciplinary infraction. Solitary confinement, minimum. Her 14 months just became 24. Ayana's face flashed through her mind, the disappointment she'd see when Tasha had to write and explain why she wasn't coming home on schedule. The resignation. The slow erosion of hope that Tasha had spent 8 years trying to rebuild. As they dragged her toward isolation, Tasha caught one last glimpse of Officer Reeves standing in the corridor, alive and confused, surrounded by inmates who would have killed her without hesitation. Worth it, Tasha thought. God help her, it was worth it. Solitary confinement was a concrete box 8 feet by 10, with a metal toilet, a concrete slab for a bed, and a slot in the door for food trays. No windows. No clock. No way to measure time except by the rhythm of meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, repeat. Tasha lost count after 5 days. The isolation played tricks on her mind. She'd hear voices that weren't there, see shadows move in the corners. She'd think about Ayana until the guilt became physical, a weight pressing on her chest. She'd replay that moment in the corridor over and over, wondering if she'd made the right choice, knowing she'd made the only choice. On what she guessed was the 7th day, the slot opened and a tray slid through. Standard food, gray meat, watery vegetables, bread that tasted like cardboard. But underneath the tray, folded into a tiny square, was a piece of paper. Tasha unfolded it carefully. "I know what you did. Thank you. CR." Just 5 words, written in neat handwriting. But they changed everything. Tasha read the note 3 times, then ate it, chewing the paper until it dissolved. Evidence. Everything in here was evidence. 3 days later, the door opened. Warden Patricia Okoye stood in the corridor, her expression unreadable. 55 years old, career corrections officer, reputation for being fair but uncompromising. She'd run this facility for 6 years, and in that time she'd seen everything twice. "Johnson," she said. "Walk with me." Tasha stepped out of the cell, blinking against the sudden brightness. Her legs felt weak from days of inactivity. Okoye led her down the corridor in silence, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. They ended up in an office Tasha had never seen before, small, cramped, filled with filing cabinets and outdated furniture. Okoye closed the door and gestured to a chair. "Sit." Tasha sat. Okoye remained standing, her arms crossed. "You pulled a fire alarm at 11:30 p.m. on the 16th. Care to explain why?" Tasha kept her face neutral. "Thought I smelled smoke." "Bullshit. There was no fire. No smoke. The alarm was pulled deliberately, and you were standing right next to it when Officer Martinez arrived. I panicked. Made a mistake. You've been here 8 years. Model prisoner. No infractions. No disciplinary issues. You don't panic. You don't make mistakes." Okoye leaned against the desk, her eyes boring into Tasha. "So I'll ask again. Why did you pull that alarm?" Tasha said nothing. Okoye sighed and pulled a folder from the desk drawer. She opened it, revealing security camera footage stills, grainy black and white images that showed Santiago's crew moving through the corridor, their positions clearly coordinated, their intent unmistakable. "We reviewed all the footage," Okoye said. "Saw 4 inmates out of their cells when they shouldn't have been. Saw them moving toward the guard station. Saw you run the opposite direction and pull the alarm." She closed the folder. "You saved Officer Reeves's life." Tasha's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. "You also violated about 15 different rules, caused a facility-wide emergency, and should be looking at an additional year in segregation." Okoye paused. "But Officer Reeves spoke on your behalf. Told me she thought the alarm was justified. Said you probably saw something that concerned you." "She doesn't know what she's talking about." "No, she doesn't. Because she's naive and inexperienced and shouldn't be working here." Okoye's voice hardened. "But she's also right. You saw something. You acted. You didn't snitch, didn't testify, didn't create problems for anyone except yourself." She pulled out another document, an incident report. "Santiago and her crew have been transferred to maximum security pending investigation. You're being released back to general population. Your additional time will be overlooked." Tasha looked up sharply. "Why?" "Because I've been running prisons for 30 years, and I know the difference between an inmate causing trouble and an inmate preventing it. You did the right thing in the wrong place, which makes you either very brave or very stupid." Okoye signed the report and filed it away. "Your release date remains unchanged. 14 months. Keep your head down, and you'll make it home to your daughter." Tasha felt something crack inside her chest. Relief mixed with shame mixed with exhaustion. "One more thing," Okoye said. "Officer Reeves requested to speak with you. I'm denying that request. You two don't need to have a relationship. You don't need to be friends. You saved her life, and that's where this ends. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Get out of my office." General population felt different after solitary. Too bright. Too loud. Too many bodies moving in too many directions. Tasha returned to her cell to find it exactly as she'd left it. Ayana's photo still on the wall, letters still under the mattress, everything untouched. But something felt different. She felt different. Word had spread about what happened. Inmates looked at her sideways in the cafeteria, whispering behind their hands. Some with respect, some with suspicion, some with the careful neutrality of people who didn't want to choose sides. Dominique found her during yard time, sitting alone on a bench near the fence. "You're insane," Dominique said, settling beside her. "You know that, right?" "Yeah. Santiago's in Max, but she's got friends. They know what you did. They know you protected a guard." "I didn't protect anyone. I pulled a fire alarm." "Same difference." Dominique studied her. "You got lucky. Warden's got a soft spot for noble gestures. But luck runs out in here. You need to watch your back." Tasha nodded slowly. She thought about that. Thought about what it meant to have made enemies out of people who had nothing but time to plan revenge. Thought about how 14 months could feel like 14 years when you were constantly looking over your shoulder. But she'd also thought about Officer Reeves walking into that ambush. About the moment before the alarm, when Tasha could have chosen differently. About the weight of doing nothing. "It was worth it," Tasha said quietly. Dominique snorted. "You really are insane." "Maybe." But for the first time in 8 years, Tasha felt like she could breathe. The weeks passed in the careful rhythm of prison routine. Meals, count, work detail, yard time, sleep. Tasha kept her head down, avoided Santiago's former crew, and focused on the calendar, slowly counting down to freedom. She saw Officer Reeves occasionally, during medication rounds, guard rotations, the careful choreography of institutional life. They never spoke. Never acknowledged each other beyond the professional minimum required. But sometimes Tasha would catch Reeves looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude maybe. Or guilt. Or the uncomfortable recognition that an inmate had been willing to sacrifice everything while Reeves herself had been oblivious to the danger. 2 months after the incident, Tasha received a letter. Not from Ayana. The handwriting was different. Neat. Professional. She opened it carefully. "Ms. Johnson, I'm not supposed to write this. The warden would probably fire me if she knew. But I need you to understand something. You saved my life. I know the official story is that you pulled a false alarm and got lucky with the timing. But I know better. I've watched the footage. I've read the reports. I've pieced together what you did and what it cost you. I can't thank you publicly. I can't acknowledge this in any official capacity. But I need you to know that what you did matters. It changed me. It made me understand that this place isn't what I thought it was. That the rules in the handbook don't match the rules that keep people alive. I'm transferring to a different facility at the end of the month. Not because I'm running away, but because I need more training, more experience, more understanding of how to actually help people instead of just following protocols. I hope you make it home to your daughter. I hope those 14 months pass quickly. I hope you know that your sacrifice wasn't wasted on someone who didn't notice. You're a better person than I am. Officer Catherine Reeves." Tasha read the letter twice, then tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. Evidence. Everything was evidence. But she remembered the words. Carried them like a talisman through the remaining months. Tasha walked out of prison on a Tuesday morning in October, wearing the same clothes she'd arrived in 8 years earlier. Jeans that no longer fit quite right, a shirt that smelled like storage, shoes that felt strange after years of institutional footwear. Ayana stood in the parking lot, older now, her hair different, her face carrying the weight of years spent waiting. But her smile was the same. Wide and genuine and full of the kind of hope Tasha had almost forgotten existed. They hugged for a long time, not speaking, just holding each other while the autumn wind scattered leaves around them. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Ayana whispered. "You made it." Tasha thought about Officer Reeves. About Santiago's crew. About the moment she'd chosen to pull that alarm knowing exactly what it would cost her. About all the nights in solitary when she'd questioned that choice. "Yeah," she said finally. "I made it." They drove away from the prison, Tasha watching it shrink in the rearview mirror, concrete walls and razor wire and all the ghosts she was leaving behind. She'd survived 8 years of invisible silence, and 1 moment of terribly visible courage. The moment had cost her 6 additional months. Had marked her as both a hero and a traitor. Had changed her relationship with every inmate who knew what she'd done. But Officer Reeves was alive. And Tasha was free. And somewhere in the space between those two facts was something that felt almost like redemption. Almost. The prison disappeared behind a curve in the road, and Tasha turned her eyes forward, toward the daughter beside her, toward the life waiting to be rebuilt, toward the future she'd earned through calculated silence and one explosive moment of defiance. She'd protected a guard from inmates who wanted her dead. She'd violated the most sacred rule of prison survival. She'd thrown away 6 months of her life for a stranger who would never be able to publicly acknowledge the debt. And given the choice, knowing everything she knew now, Tasha realized she'd do it again. Not because it was smart. Not because it was safe. But because some choices transcended survival. They defined who you were when everything else was stripped away. In the end, that was the only truth that mattered. The prison's truth had tried to make her invisible. But Tasha had learned something more important. Sometimes being seen was worth the cost. Even if the price was written in lost time and permanent scars. Even if the only witness was her own conscience. Even if the world would never know. Ayanna reached over and squeezed her mother's hand, and Tasha squeezed back, holding on to the one thing prison could never take away, the knowledge that she'd chosen dignity over survival, humanity over self-preservation, and somehow, impossibly, lived to tell no one about it. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibility. Tasha drove toward it, carrying her silence like a crown.